Good evening. Thank you. It's a real great honor for me to be here. Thank you for having me. Thank you for allowing me to share my story with you this evening. As you have already heard, my name is Kamkwamba. I'm from Malawi. So if you are not familiar with where Malawi is in Southeast Africa, bordered by Mozambique, Zambia, and Tanzania. So geographically, that's where Malawi is. I grew up in a very small village in Malawi. I grew up in the family of 7 children. All sisters, excepting me. You can imagine, life wasn't too easy for me growing up. Especially at school, sometimes the other boys, if I have bananas, they say give us your banana. Although I had an elder sister, instead of me telling her that these boys are bothering me, I was so shy to do so because I thought that I would look weak if I tell her. So I just always do anything on my own. So, in Malawi, as we are growing up, we are pretty much most of us, we are farmers. We depend on growing our own crops. We grow corn, soybeans, sweet potato. So pretty much most people who live in rural areas, they depend on planting their own food. If they are lucky, if they are planted enough of the food and they have supplies, they can be able to use some of it to sell, to get some money that they can be able to help out with their families. So farming is it can be very difficult, and it can also be easy. There are a number of things that making farming really difficult to many people in rural areas. One of the things that makes farming really difficult is the weather, the price of seeds, or the price of fertilizer. If you don't have enough money to buy fertilizer, then in that particular year, you're going to be really in trouble. As many farmers in rural areas, the soil that they use has lost most of its nutrients. So in order to be able to harvest enough crop, you need to apply your fertilizer, which is very difficult to many people in rural areas who don't have enough money to buy it most of the time. So because of that, sometimes farmers get real struggles. The other problem is the price of seeds. If the price of seeds goes up and you're a farmer, in that particular year, you can also be in trouble. Or the very difficult, one of the most difficult thing that pretty much most of farmers, they don't have control over it, it's the weather. Many people that are farmers in Malawi, they depend on the rain. We plant during the rain season. Nobody really use irrigation. So if in that particular year you have drought, as a farmer, you're going to be really in trouble. Or if there's flooding, you can also be in trouble. So in 2000 to 2001 growing season, one of this problem, a lot of people experienced it. There was drought in the country. As the result, a lot of people only harvested a quarter amount of what they were hoping to harvest. So to live up on that quarter, it was difficult to many families around the country. Including my family was badly affected by the situation. Soon enough, a lot of people started running out of food. A lot of people were starving to death. At that time, you're going to be able to buy some corn that we used to make our food at the market, but the price of corn was so expensive because most of the corn that they were selling at the market was coming from the neighboring country, Tanzania. So to transport it, it was expensive, and also some people took advantage of the situation. They were tripling the price. So as many people in the village who only got money once a year, during the harvest season, they had little like to struggle. Most of them, they had to sell most of their stuff so that they can be able to get money to feed their families. At that time, my family also was badly like affected by the situation. One thing that my family did, when they noticed that they had only one bag of corn, they decided like to grind all the corn. My mom took it to grind it, and she started like making a business. She was making cakes, selling the cakes at the market, and she was hoping that the profit that she would be getting from the business, it would be enough to sustain us until the next harvesting season. But it was really difficult because the price of corn at the market continued rising. So at that time, it was the time that I was supposed to start my high school. And because of the situation, my parents couldn't afford to pay for my tuition, and I was forced to drop out of school. Schools in Malawi, primary schools are for free, while secondary schools, you have to pay for it. So at that time, when I had like to drop out of secondary school, I looked at my father, and looking those dry fields, it was the future I couldn't accept. I didn't want to become like him. I didn't want to become a farmer. It's not that I didn't want to become a farmer because I hate farming, no. I love farming. But I didn't want to become a farmer just because that's the only thing that I can do with my life, which is the case to many people in my community. They are farmers not by choice, but they are farmers because of the circumstances that they are in. The only thing that they can do is to farm, to grow crops that they can be able to feed their families. So for me, I wanted to live the life where I can be able to do anything at any time that would be benefiting my family and also helping me to do anything that I need to do. So for me to get out of that cycle was through education. So when I had to drop out of school, it was really hard for me because that was the only way for me to get out of that situation. So like enough, 1 year before I graduated from the primary school, some organization donates the books at the school, and they open up a small library. It was very small, so I decided that I should start like reading books so that I can keep up with my schoolwork. I was hoping that by the time when the hunger will be over, my parents will find money and they will send me back to school. I didn't want to be behind from my friends who were going to school at that time. So I decided like to start like going to the library to read books. One thing that I also started like doing was to ask my friends who were going to school at that time, ask them, what did you study today? And sometimes I'll take notes from them, trying to just keep up with the schoolwork. So at the library, most of the time I was reading textbooks that they were using at school. And later on, I became very interested in reading science books because I really wanted to understand how different things work. I remember when I was much younger, asking people, how does the car work? They say, you just put in a gas and then you start the engine and you can drive. I'm like, I know you need to put in a gas, but how does that gas turn the engine to speed that you can be able to drive? Nobody could really tell me. So for me, I really wanted to find the reason behind it. One other thing that I remember, when I was also like much younger, I remember some of my friends were introduced like to movies. So every morning when they come to school, they'll be telling me that last night we want to watch this movie. People were doing all this action like jumping up and down. it just like started like in my mind growing, like, how is it possible that you can see an image of a person doing all kind of action just like in a piece of glass? I couldn't really understand. So when I got this chance of going to read these science books, I was hoping that I'll have the answers towards the question that I've had for quite a long time. So, but at that time, I couldn't read English that well. So I started like using the diagrams and seeing the pictures to learn the words around it. Sometimes I'll ask the librarian to explain to me what does this word means. But the challenging was that some of the words didn't have any translation like into my language. So I always have to use my own imagination to really know what is going on and what it's all about. But through all these like diagrams, I was able to understand and learn how electromagnetics work and how you're going to be able like to generate electricity using coil of wires and also like magnet. One day, when I went to the library, I found this book called Using Energy. It had these pictures of the windmill. When I opened inside, they say windmills could pump water and generate electricity. The word pump water attracted my attention. I was like, if I can be able to build this windmill to pump water, then I can be able to solve the problem that we are facing. We can be able to plant food 2 to 3 times a year, which means that we can double the amount of food that we grow each year. So at that time, I decided to build my own windmill. But the problem was that I didn't have any money to buy materials for my windmill. So what I ended up doing, I ended up going to the junkyard. The junkyard was just like next to my high school, the school that I just dropped from. Before that school was a school, that place used to be a garage for a certain company. When they run out of business, they donate the place to the Minister of Education, and the Minister of Education turned that place into a school. So there are so many scraps, parts of like tractors, and so many parts of like engines. So I went there to collect all the materials that I needed for my windmill. I had no idea what exactly I was looking at the junkyard. When I was doing this, a lot of people were laughing at me. They were thinking that maybe I'm going crazy. Some of them, they were saying that maybe I'm smoking weed. My mom, she was also worried of me. She was like, you are no longer going to find a wife because no one will want to marry a crazy man. I understand why they were worried, because at that time, I was telling them that I want to build this windmill, but they didn't know what windmill is. And at the same time, I was collecting this junk, putting them in my room. And at some point, my room itself started looking like a junk. So regardless of what people were saying, when I was collecting all these pieces that I needed for my windmill, I didn't stop going looking for the materials. So at the junkyard, I was able to find a tractor fan that I used as the main load of my windmill, and I was also able to use the shock absorber I used as the shaft of my windmill. So for my blades of the windmill, I was able to use the PVC pipes. After some time of collecting all these pieces and putting them together, I was able to build the windmill. At the time, I was using that windmill to power a light bulb. So most of the time, we'll be using it for lights every night, instead of using the kerosene lamp, which most of the time my parents had to go and buy it it was expensive, and also it was causing, breathing the smoke from the kerosene lamp. Sometimes it was making us sick, getting like coughing most of the time. So the other thing that I had to do with the windmill was that I also had to build a light switch and also the circuit breaker. The reason why I had to build this like circuit breaker was that at that time, the wiring of my house, I didn't use proper wires. I was using the wires that were uninsulated wires. So I was afraid that if the wires are going to cross together, it can burn my house. So in order to prevent that, I had to build a circuit breaker, which I copied after like the idea of how electric bell. I saw the diagram of electric bell in one of the book, and I copied the same idea in order to build the circuit breaker, which I used just like nail and coils of wire to make it work. The other thing that I did that people were able like to help me out after like the conference was also like to send me back to school. So I went like to South Africa for 2 years